You should have listened to me. Now feel this. Ah, stop it.
The scream that came from the kitchen that evening was not the kind you forget. It was the kind that stops time. The kind that makes your heart jump into your throat and reminds you that life can change in a single moment. Kwame stood in his study on the top floor of his Lagos penthouse, staring at the documents spread across his mahogany desk, when he heard it. His mother's voice, shrill and piercing, calling out his name as if her life depended on it. He didn't think. He just moved. Down the marble staircase, 3 steps at a time. His expensive Italian shoes barely touching the ground. His security team was already moving toward the kitchen, but Kwame was faster. The door swung open, and what he saw in those next 5 seconds would burn into his memory forever. His wife, Zainab, stood over his mother with a kettle in her trembling hands. Boiling water, actual boiling water, steaming and hissing from the spout, was being poured down toward his mother's arm. His mother was on the floor, trying to shield herself, her wrapper torn and her skin already turning red from the heat. Zainab's face was twisted with something he didn't recognize. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. Kwame grabbed the kettle from his wife's hands, and it clattered across the Italian marble floor, scattering boiling water everywhere. For a moment no one moved. No one breathed. Zainab stared at him with an expression he had never seen before. His mother lay on the ground, trembling and crying. And Kwame stood there, his chest heaving, his mind struggling to make sense of what he had just witnessed. His mother, Comfort, the woman who had raised him alone in the slums of Accra, the woman who had worked 3 jobs so he could go to school, the woman who had suffered through every struggle of his childhood, was lying on his kitchen floor with burns forming on her skin. And his wife, the woman he had married just 18 months ago in a ceremony that had cost more than most people earned in a year, had done this to her. But the question that would haunt him, the question that would keep him awake through countless nights, was why? Why would Zainab, a woman who had everything, attack his mother with boiling water? What could possibly drive a person to such an act of violence? As Kwame helped his mother to the nearest chair and called for the household staff to bring the first aid kit, he looked at Zainab, who had backed into the corner of the kitchen. Her hands were still shaking. Her breathing was ragged. And in her eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. He saw fear. Deep, terrifying fear. The kind of fear that only comes when you've done something that has shattered your entire world. In that moment, Kwame realized that there was a story here. A story that went far deeper than a simple act of violence. A story that would require him to confront truths he had been avoiding, secrets he had ignored, and a reality about his own family that he had refused to see. The boiling water had revealed more than just burns. It had exposed the cracks in the foundation of his entire life. And as he held his mother's trembling hand, watching the blistering begin to form on her skin, Kwame made a decision. He would find out the truth, no matter what it cost him. But first he needed to understand how he had gotten here. How had the most beautiful thing in his life become so dark? When did love turn into cruelty? And most importantly, what would he do now that he knew his wife was capable of this? To understand this story you have to go back. You have to go back to when Kwame was just a young man with nothing but ambition and a dream. 18 years before the boiling water incident, Kwame lived in a 1-room apartment in Accra with his mother, Comfort. She was a market woman, selling vegetables and plantains at the local market every single day, rain or shine. His father had left when Kwame was 3 years old, a man who couldn't handle the responsibility of fatherhood, and so it was just the 2 of them against the world. But Kwame was different. He was hungry for more. While other boys his age were content working in shops or doing small trades, Kwame studied. He attended the local school, and even though his mother could barely afford the fees, she paid them anyway. She sacrificed everything for his education. She went without new clothes for 5 years so he could buy textbooks. She fasted during Ramadan and used the money she saved to pay for his entrance exams to university. And it paid off. Kwame got into the University of Ghana to study business and economics. He worked through university, doing everything from tutoring to selling phone credit on the streets, but he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot his mother selling vegetables in the hot sun while he sat in air-conditioned classrooms. That guilt, that gratitude, it drove him harder than anything else could. After university, Kwame started small. He began importing electronics from China and selling them throughout West Africa. His first business deal made him 50,000 cedis, a fortune to him at the time. He used that money to start another venture. Then another. By the time he was 30 years old, Kwame had built a business empire that made him one of the youngest billionaires in West Africa. Real estate, technology, manufacturing, finance. His name was in the newspapers. Young entrepreneurs wanted to be like him. And most importantly, his mother never had to sell vegetables in the market again. He built her a beautiful house in Accra. He gave her everything she had ever dreamed of. But he never married. He was too focused on work, too dedicated to building his empire. His friends would joke about it. They would ask him why he was wasting his youth chasing money when he should be chasing women. But Kwame knew something they didn't. Success without someone to share it with felt empty. And then he met Zainab at a charity gala in Lagos. She was stunning. She had skin like polished ebony, eyes that sparkled like diamonds, and a smile that could light up a room. She came from money too, old money, aristocratic money. Her father was a retired general, her mother a famous fashion designer. When Zainab laughed, everyone around her stopped to listen. When she danced, people couldn't look away. Kwame was captivated. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never felt before. Love. Real, overwhelming, all-consuming love. He didn't care that she was from a different world. He didn't care that her family looked down on him for being a self-made man. He loved her with an intensity that surprised even him. He courted her for 6 months. He took her to Paris, to Dubai, to the Maldives. He bought her jewelry that cost more than houses. He showed her a life of luxury that made her forget she had ever lived any other way. And when he proposed to her on a beach in Santorini, with a 12-carat diamond ring, she said yes. She said yes without hesitation. She said yes like she had been waiting her whole life for him. His mother, Comfort, was happy for him. She could see the joy in her son's face. But there was something in her eyes, a knowing look, a warning she couldn't quite voice. She liked Zainab, or at least she tried to. But something about the girl made her uncomfortable. If you're watching this story from somewhere amazing, leave a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. We want to hear from you. Kwame and Zainab got married 18 months before the boiling water incident. It was a wedding that people talked about for years. It was held at a 5-star resort in Accra, with over 1,000 guests. Celebrities came. Politicians came. It was the wedding of the year. Kwame thought he had everything. He had his mother. He had his wealth. And now he had the woman of his dreams. He thought his life was complete. He thought he had finally reached the top and that nothing could ever come down and knock him off. But he was about to learn a very important lesson about life. Sometimes the most beautiful things hide the darkest secrets. Sometimes the people we love the most are not who we think they are. And sometimes, love is not enough to hold two people together when one of them is hiding something so terrible that it destroys everything it touches. What would you have done if you were in Kwame's position? What would you do if you discovered your wife was capable of something this violent? Tell us in the comments section. And if you're enjoying this story so far, please like and subscribe to this channel. We have so many more incredible stories like this one coming, and you don't want to miss them. Share this video with your friends too. Let them know about the mystery we're about to unravel together. The first months of marriage were everything Kwame had dreamed they would be. Zainab moved into his penthouse in Lagos, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the infinity pool, the private cinema, the wine cellar that cost more than most people's entire homes. He seemed happy. She spent her days shopping, going to spas, having lunch with her friends at the most exclusive restaurants in the city. At night, they would dine together, and she would tell him how much she loved him, how grateful she was for the life he had given her. His mother, Comfort, came to visit 3 months into the marriage. She had been hesitant about moving to Lagos, about leaving Accra, but Kwame had insisted. He wanted his 2 most important women in his life to be close to him. He set up a beautiful guest wing in the penthouse for her, with her own living space, her own kitchen, everything she could possibly need. First, Zainab was kind to Comfort. She would greet her warmly, ask her how she was doing, offer to take her shopping or introduce her to her friends. But slowly, imperceptibly, things began to change. Started with small things. Comment here, a subtle dig there. When Comfort would wear her traditional cloth, Zainab would say something like, "Oh, that's nice. Very authentic." When Comfort would cook her traditional soups and stews, Zainab would pick at the food and suggest that maybe they should hire a private chef who could make more modern cuisine. Kwame didn't notice at first. He was busy with work. His business was expanding, and he was traveling constantly between Lagos, Accra, and Abuja. He would be gone for days at a time, and when he came home, he was exhausted. Zainab seemed to handle his absence well. She never complained. She never demanded that he spend more time with her. She was understanding, patient, supportive. To him, she seemed like the perfect wife. But something was happening in the penthouse when he was away. Something dark was growing in the spaces between his absence and Zainab's presence. Comfort began to change. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She spent more time in her own room and less time in the common areas. When Kwame would ask her how she was doing, she would smile and say everything was fine, but he could see the sadness in her eyes. He would ask Zainab if everything was okay with his mother, and Zainab would say, "Oh, she's just adjusting. Moving to a new city is hard for older people. I'm trying my best to help her settle in." 6 months into the marriage, Comfort finally opened up to her son. They were sitting on the balcony of the penthouse, overlooking the Lagos lagoon, and she took his hand and said, "Kwame, I need to tell you something about your wife." But before she could say anything, Zainab called out from inside the penthouse. She needed Kwame for something urgent. Business call. Important deal. Could he come right now? And Kwame, ever the businessman, got up and went to his wife. By the time he came back to his mother, she had retreated into herself again. She wouldn't say anything more about it. A month later, Comfort fell ill. She developed a fever, severe body aches, and weakness that seemed to come out of nowhere. Kwame called the best doctors in Lagos to examine her. They ran tests, but they couldn't find anything specific. She seemed to be suffering from something that the doctors couldn't diagnose. She lost weight. She became skeletal. She spent most of her time in bed, barely eating, barely speaking. Kwame was devastated. The woman who had given him everything, who had sacrificed her entire life for him, was wasting away in his penthouse, and he didn't know why. He brought in additional doctors. He offered to fly her to Europe for treatment. But Comfort refused. She just wanted to rest, she said. She just needed time. During this period, Zainab was attentive to her husband's suffering. She would comfort him, tell him not to worry, that his mother would get better. She would bring him tea at night, run her fingers through his hair, whisper words of encouragement in his ear. She never complained about his mother's illness or the burden it placed on their household. She seemed genuinely concerned, genuinely caring. But then something strange happened. One afternoon, when Kwame was working in his study, he overheard a conversation between Zainab and her mother on the phone. Zainab's mother was visiting from Accra, and they were in the living room, not knowing that Kwame could hear them through the intercom system that connected the rooms. "How much longer?" Zainab's mother asked. "Not long," Zainab replied. "She's already barely eating. Another month, maybe 2, and it will all be over." "And you're sure he won't suspect anything?" her mother asked. "He's too busy to notice. He's too in love with me to see what's right in front of him. By the time his mother is gone, he'll be so grateful to have me by his side that he won't even question it." Kwame's blood turned to ice. He slowly backed away from the intercom and sat down heavily in his chair. His mind was reeling. What did that mean? What was Zainab suggesting? Was she saying that she had something to do with his mother's illness? That she was deliberately making her sick? He thought about all the meals Zainab had been preparing for his mother. He thought about how she had insisted on being the one to care for her, to bring her food, to give her medicine. He thought about his mother's desperate attempts to tell him something weeks ago, the sadness in her eyes, the way she had retreated when interrupted. Kwame felt a sickness rising in his stomach. A cold, creeping realization was taking shape in his mind. And he knew with absolute certainty that his marriage, his beautiful, perfect marriage, was built on a foundation of lies and darkness. But he still didn't know the full extent of what Zainab had done. He didn't know her motivations. He didn't know what had driven her to this point. That evening, Kwame went to his mother's room and found her sitting by the window, looking out at the city lights. He took her hand, and she looked at him with eyes that held years of pain and suffering. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. "Tell me what's been happening." And what she told him would change everything. Comfort's voice was weak, but her words were steady. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her son to finally see what she had been trying to tell him all along. She told him everything, detail by painful detail. And as she spoke, Kwame's understanding of his wife transformed from love into something darker and more complex. It had started innocently enough, Comfort said. When she first arrived at the penthouse, Zainab had been warm and welcoming. But as the days passed, Comfort began to notice things. The way Zainab would watch her when she thought no one was looking. The way her smile would fade the moment Kwame left the room. The way she would ask questions about Comfort's health, her medical history, what medicines she was taking. Then came the day that changed everything. Comfort had overheard a phone conversation between Zainab and someone she called father. They were discussing money. Lots of money. Zainab's voice had been desperate, almost pleading. "He's spending too much," she said. "The business is doing well, but he's being generous with everyone. His mother, his staff, charities. I need you to help me figure out a way to secure my future. I can't depend on him loving me forever. What if he gets tired of me? What if he finds someone younger, someone more beautiful?" The voice on the other end of the phone, Comfort heard, belonged to Zainab's father. He said something that made Zainab laugh, a laugh that had no warmth in it. "If his mother is gone, he'll be more dependent on you. He'll turn to you for everything. You'll become indispensable to him. And when he's grieving, when he's vulnerable, you can convince him to sign over more of his assets to you, to secure your marriage, to ensure that you're taken care of." Comfort hadn't wanted to believe what she was hearing. But she knew in that moment what Zainab was planning. She knew that her daughter-in-law had decided that she was an obstacle to the life she wanted, and she was going to remove that obstacle by any means necessary. The poisoning began slowly. Zainab started giving Comfort tea in the mornings, insisting that it would help with the aches and pains of aging. Comfort drank it because she didn't want to offend her son's wife. But after a few days, she began to feel strange. Her stomach would cramp. Her head would ache. She would feel dizzy and weak. She tried to tell Kwame, but Zainab was always there, suggesting that his mother was just getting older, that her body was starting to fail her, that she should see a doctor. Then Zainab moved on to the food. She would prepare special meals for Comfort, dishes that looked delicious but tasted slightly off, slightly bitter underneath the spices. Comfort would eat them because her son's wife had prepared them with apparent love and care. But each meal left her weaker than the last. She began to waste away. She could barely get out of bed. Comfort had tried to tell Kwame so many times. She had tried to warn him about his wife. But every time she opened her mouth, something would interrupt. Phone call. Visitor. Zainab appearing at just the right moment to redirect Kwame's attention. It was as if Zainab had a sixth sense for when Comfort was about to reveal the truth, and she would swoop in and prevent it from happening. Then one day something changed. One of the household staff members, a young girl named Abina who worked in the kitchen, came to Comfort's room. Abina had seen Zainab putting strange powder into Comfort's food. She had seen Zainab grinding up herbs and mixing them into the tea. Abina was terrified, but she couldn't stay silent. She told Comfort what she had witnessed, and she begged her to tell Kwame. But Comfort was afraid. She was afraid that Kwame wouldn't believe her. She was afraid that he loved Zainab too much to accept the truth. She was afraid that if she accused Zainab, her son would have to choose between her and his wife, and she didn't know which one he would choose. So she suffered in silence. She endured the poisoning. She watched as Zainab played the role of the concerned wife, the devoted daughter-in-law, the woman who was so worried about her husband's mother. And all the while, Zainab was slowly, methodically trying to kill her. But then Comfort made a decision. She decided that she was not going to die quietly. She was not going to let Zainab win. She started pretending that the poisoning was working. She made herself appear weaker than she actually was. She played along with Zainab's plan, all the while gathering evidence, all the while waiting for the right moment to reveal everything to her son. And that moment came on the day of the boiling water. You see, Comfort had been planning something. She had been in contact with Abina, the kitchen staff member who had witnessed Zainab's crime. Together, they had been gathering evidence. Comfort had saved samples of the food that Zainab had given her. She had documented everything in a journal that she kept hidden under her mattress. On that fateful afternoon, Comfort had confronted Zainab directly. She had told her that she knew everything. She had told her that she was going to tell Kwame the truth, and that Zainab would spend the rest of her life in prison for what she had done. Zainab had lost control. The carefully constructed facade had cracked. The woman that Kwame thought he knew, the beautiful, graceful, loving wife, had disappeared. In her place was a woman filled with rage, desperation, and a fury that had been building for months. Zainab had gone to the kitchen, boiled water, and came back to attack Comfort. She hadn't planned to do it. It wasn't premeditated in that specific moment. But the rage, the desperation, the fear that her plan was unraveling, had driven her to an act of pure violence. As Comfort finished telling her story, tears streamed down her face. Kwame held his mother in his arms, and he wept. He wept for the suffering she had endured. He wept for the blindness of his love. He wept for the beautiful life he thought he had that turned out to be nothing but a carefully constructed lie. But his tears would soon turn to something else. Anger. Cold, focused, determined anger. Because Kwame had made a decision. He was going to find out if there was more to this story. He was going to discover if Zainab was working alone or if there were others involved in this conspiracy. And he was going to make sure that justice was served, no matter what the cost. What happened next was calculated, methodical, and perfectly orchestrated. Kwame called his security team and instructed them to bring Zainab to the study. He didn't confront her with anger. He didn't rage at her or demand explanations. Instead, he was calm. He was composed. He was terrifyingly, ice-coldly rational. When Zainab entered the study, she was already nervous. She could sense that something had changed. She could feel the shift in the air, the way that Kwame's eyes looked at her now with something that resembled contempt. She tried to smile, tried to maintain the facade, but her hands were trembling. Kwame sat behind his desk, the same desk where he had been working when he heard his mother scream. He gestured for Zainab to sit down. She sat, perched on the edge of the chair like a bird ready to flee. "Your mother is going to be fine," Kwame said quietly. "The burns are not severe. She will heal. And when she does, she will testify to exactly what you did." Zainab's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I heard your conversation with your father," Kwame continued. "I know about the poisoning. I know about Abina. I know about the evidence my mother has been gathering. I know everything." For a moment, Zainab just stared at him. Then something shifted in her expression. The fear didn't disappear, but something else emerged. A desperate kind of defiance. She stood up from the chair. "You want to know why I did it?" she demanded, her voice rising. You want to know why I had to do something this extreme? Kwame said nothing. He just watched her with those cold, calculating eyes. Because I was trapped, Zainab said, her voice becoming louder, more frantic. I was trapped in this marriage with a man who was never going to truly love me. I was trapped in a life where I was always going to be second to his precious mother. Do you know what it's like to be married to someone and feel like you're invisible? Do you know what it's like to watch the man you married care more about his mother than he cares about you? So you tried to kill her, Kwame said flatly. Yes, Zainab screamed. Yes, I did. Because I knew that if she was gone, you would finally see me. You would finally realize that I was all you needed. Your mother was holding you back, making you guilty, making you feel obligated to care for her instead of building a real life with me. Kwame leaned back in his chair. And your father? Did he put you up to this? Zainab's face crumbled. She sat back down heavily in the chair. My father is broke, she said quietly. Everything that looked like old money, like aristocratic wealth, was an illusion. My mother's fashion design business is failing. My father's military pension is barely enough to cover their expenses. They're about to lose everything. When I married you, they thought I was going to save them. They thought I would convince you to invest in my father's business ventures, to give them money to take care of them. She looked up at Kwame with desperate eyes. When I realized you were serious about including my mother-in-law in our lives, when I saw how much you loved her, how much you would always prioritize her, I knew I had to do something. My father came to me with the idea. He said if your mother was gone, you would be easier to manipulate. You would be grieving, vulnerable. You would do whatever I asked. Kwame felt a coldness settle in his chest. The conspiracy was deeper than he had thought. It wasn't just Zainab acting out of spite or jealousy. It was a calculated family scheme designed to infiltrate his life, to use him, to exploit his wealth and his love. Where is the evidence? He asked. The poison. The records. Everything my mother documented. Zainab told him. She told him where Comfort had hidden the journal. She told him which foods contained the poison. She told him that Abina had saved samples of the poisoned tea. She was cooperating now, perhaps thinking that confession might save her, might make Kwame more lenient. But Kwame was not going to be lenient. Over the next few hours, he had his security team gather all the evidence. He contacted the police. He contacted his personal lawyer. He documented everything meticulously. He took photographs of his mother's burns. He had her medical records compiled. He had Abina give a formal statement to the police. And then he did something that surprised everyone who knew him. Instead of pressing charges himself, he set up a trust fund for his mother's medical care and recovery. He made sure that she would be completely taken care of for the rest of her life. And then he stepped back and let the law take its course. The police arrested Zainab and subsequently her father, who was brought in for questioning. The case became a national scandal. A billionaire's wife from a prominent family, arrested for attempted murder. The newspapers ran the story for weeks. Talk shows debated it. People took sides. Some sympathized with Zainab's desperation. Others defended Kwame's actions. But in the midst of all this chaos, something unexpected happened. Kwame's mother recovered. Not just physically but emotionally. She regained her strength. Her color returned. She began to smile again. And Kwame realized something profound. His love for his mother, the love he had always been careful not to express too openly, the love he had been almost ashamed of because it seemed unmasculine, that love was actually the purest, most beautiful thing in his life. If you're still with us, thank you for watching this incredible story unfold. This is a reminder that love can be beautiful, but it can also be weaponized. This is a story about family, loyalty, and the price of ambition. If you're enjoying this journey, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with your family and friends. Comment below and tell us what you think Kwame should do next. Should he forgive Zainab? Should he give her another chance? Or should he let justice run its full course? We want to hear your thoughts. Your engagement means everything to us, and it helps us create more stories like this one. Trial lasted 4 months. 4 intense, exhausting months where Kwame sat in the courtroom day after day, watching as the legal system unraveled the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed his family. Zainab's defense team tried everything. They argued that she was mentally unstable, that she had been under stress, that her father had manipulated her into the crime. They tried to paint her as a victim of circumstance rather than a perpetrator. But the evidence was overwhelming. Abina's testimony was damning. The samples of poisoned tea matched the poison found in Zainab's possession. Comfort's documented journal, meticulous in its detail, painted a clear picture of premeditated harm. The phone recordings between Zainab and her father were played in court, and every word condemned them both. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed. Journalists filled every seat. Spectators lined the walls. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s who had seen countless cases of greed and betrayal, read the verdict with a voice that showed no emotion. Zainab was found guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy. Her father was found guilty of conspiracy and aiding and abetting a crime. Zainab received a sentence of 15 years in prison. Her father received 12 years. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom as she spoke about the severity of the crime, the premeditation involved, and the breach of trust that had been violated. But as Zainab was led away from the courtroom in handcuffs, something unexpected happened. She looked back at Kwame with an expression that was neither defiant nor remorseful. It was blank, empty, as if something inside her had died. And Kwame realized in that moment that Zainab would never understand what she had lost. She would never comprehend the enormity of her actions or the ripples they had created. The media coverage of the trial had been intense and relentless. Kwame's name was everywhere. His business dealings were scrutinized. Journalists dug into his past, looking for secrets, for scandals, for anything that would make the story more salacious. But they found nothing. Kwame was clean. He was successful because he was smart and hardworking, not because he was corrupt or ruthless. Some journalists tried to portray him as a villain anyway. They suggested that his rejection of Zainab had been cruel, that he should have been more compassionate to her financial struggles. They argued that Comfort had been interfering in the marriage, that she had been too protective of her son. But these voices were drowned out by the overwhelming support that Kwame received from the public. People who had never met him became invested in his story. They sent him letters of support. They told him that his mother was a hero for surviving such a terrible ordeal. They praised him for standing by his mother instead of choosing his wife. In a world where family loyalty is often compromised by wealth and status, Kwame's unwavering devotion to his mother became a beacon of hope for people who were tired of seeing families torn apart by greed and betrayal. But there was a cost to this public exposure. Kwame's business suffered. Some business partners wanted to distance themselves from the scandal. Some clients took their business elsewhere, not wanting to be associated with such a high-profile case. Kwame lost millions in deals that fell through, in partnerships that were abandoned. But he didn't care. He had learned that money wasn't everything. Family was. 6 months after the trial ended, Kwame made a decision that shocked the business world. He decided to step back from his role as CEO of his company. He handed over the day-to-day operations to a trusted lieutenant and took on a more advisory role. He wanted to spend time with his mother. He wanted to travel with her, to show her the world, to make up for all the years she had spent sacrificing for him. Comfort, for her part, had become a different woman after the trial. She had survived something that should have broken her. She had been poisoned, nearly murdered, and dragged through a very public legal process. But instead of becoming bitter or withdrawn, she became stronger. She became an advocate for victims of domestic abuse and attempted murder. She gave speeches at schools and community centers about the dangers of greed and the importance of family protection. She wrote a book about her experience. It became a bestseller across West Africa. Young women read it and learned to recognize the warning signs of manipulation and abuse. Mothers read it and learned how to protect their children from predatory relationships. The book was translated into multiple languages and sold hundreds of thousands of copies. But the most important moment came when Kwame and his mother were sitting on the balcony of the penthouse one evening, watching the sun set over Lagos. The same balcony where Comfort had tried to warn him about Zainab all those months ago. The same balcony where he had refused to listen. Comfort took her son's hand and said, "I'm proud of you, Kwame. Not because you're a billionaire. Not because you're successful in business. I'm proud of you because you chose me. When you had to choose between your wife and your mother, you chose your mother. That took courage." Kwame looked at his mother, this woman who had given him everything, and he said, "Mother, I didn't choose you over Zainab. I chose the truth over a lie. I chose love over ambition. I chose family over status. And I would make the same choice again, every single time." They sat together in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. And in that moment, Kwame understood something that he had been searching for his entire life. Success wasn't measured in money or power or status. Success was measured in the people you loved and the people who loved you back. Success was measured in the choices you made when everything was on the line. Success was measured in loyalty and sacrifice and the willingness to stand by the people who mattered most. But the story wasn't over yet. Because there was still one question that remained unanswered. One mystery that had been nagging at Kwame since the day of the trial. And that mystery would lead him to a discovery that would change everything once again. 3 months after Zainab was sent to prison, Kwame received a letter. It came to his office, delivered by hand by a courier he didn't recognize. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive paper, written in a handwriting he recognized immediately. It was from Zainab. The letter read, "Kwame, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know you hate me. But there is something you need to know, something I should have told you before everything fell apart. I am writing this from prison, and I have nothing left to lose. I need you to know the truth about why I did what I did. The real truth, not the version I gave in court." Kwame's hands trembled as he read the letter. For months, he had thought he understood Zainab's motivations. He had believed it was pure greed, pure ambition, pure manipulation. But as he continued reading, he realized that he had been wrong. Zainab wrote that she had met someone in prison. An older woman who had served 20 years for a crime she didn't commit. This woman had been wrongfully convicted because of false evidence and a corrupt legal system. As Zainab talked to this woman day after day, she began to understand something about herself that she had never understood before. She began to understand that she was sick. That her need to control, her need to manipulate, her need to destroy anyone who stood in her way, were symptoms of something deeper. Something psychological. She wrote about her childhood. She wrote about a father who had always told her that she was never good enough, that she had to be perfect, that she had to achieve more and have more and be more than everyone around her. She wrote about a mother who was so obsessed with status and appearances that she had forgotten how to be human. She wrote about growing up in a household where love was conditional and success was measured only in material possessions. And she wrote about Kwame. She wrote that when she met him, she had seen something in him that she had never seen before. She had seen a man who loved his mother unconditionally. She had seen a man who had built his empire not for ego or status, but to take care of the people he loved. And instead of admiring him for this, instead of learning from him, she had been terrified by it. Because she realized that Kwame's love for his mother was something she would never have. She realized that her own parents would never love her the way Kwame's mother loved him, unconditionally and sacrificially. So she had tried to destroy it. She had tried to kill his mother because she couldn't bear to see the kind of love that she had always wanted but never had. She had tried to eliminate the symbol of everything she lacked. In the letter, Zainab asked for forgiveness. Not because she expected Kwame to give it, but because she needed to ask. She wrote that she was getting help in prison. She was seeing a therapist. She was taking medication for her mental health issues. She was beginning to understand herself in ways she never had before. And she was beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had done. She wrote, I tried to destroy your mother because I was envious of the love you had for her. I tried to steal your wealth because I was terrified of being poor like I had been as a child. I tried to manipulate you because I had never been taught that real love doesn't require manipulation or control. I was a broken person trying to fill the cracks in my soul with money and status and the possession of another human being. And in the process, I nearly destroyed 3 lives. I nearly destroyed you. I nearly destroyed your mother. And I definitely destroyed myself. The letter ended with these words. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I just needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did and why I did it. And I am spending every day of my imprisonment trying to become a better person, trying to understand the damage I have caused, and trying to find a way to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. Kwame sat in his office for a long time after reading the letter. He didn't know what to feel. He didn't know whether to be angry or sympathetic or both. He read the letter again and then again, and with each reading, his understanding shifted. He began to see Zainab not as a villain, but as a victim of her own upbringing, her own psychological wounds, her own inability to love or be loved in a healthy way. He made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He decided to visit Zainab in prison, not to forgive her, not to absolve her of her crimes, but to understand her, to look into the eyes of the woman he had loved and see the broken person underneath the beautiful facade. When he saw her in the visiting room, separated by the thick glass that kept prisoners and visitors apart, Zainab cried. She cried so hard that the guards asked if she needed to end the visit. But Kwame gestured for them to let her continue. He picked up the phone that connected them through the glass. I got your letter, he said simply. I know, Zainab replied through her tears. I didn't know if you would come. I came because I needed to see you, Kwame said. I needed to know if you were real. If the woman I married was real or if she was just an illusion. I was both, Zainab said. I was real and an illusion at the same time. I was a real person with real feelings and real pain. But I was also an illusion because I was pretending to be something I wasn't. I was pretending to love you when I was actually afraid of you. I was pretending to care about your mother when I was actually envious of her. Everything was a lie because I didn't know how to be authentic. Kwame listened to her words, and he felt something shift inside him. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close to it. It was compassion for a human being who had been so broken that she had broken others. It was understanding that evil is often born from pain, that cruelty often comes from those who have been cruelly treated, that the cycle of damage repeats itself until someone has the courage to break it. I hope you get the help you need, Kwame said. I hope you understand yourself better. And I hope that someday you can find peace with what you've done. Do you forgive me? Zainab asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kwame thought about the question for a long time before he answered. I forgive you, he said finally. Not because what you did was forgivable, but because holding on to my anger will only hurt me and my mother. And we've both been hurt enough. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you in my life. Forgiveness means I'm letting go of the poison so that it doesn't destroy me like it was destroying you. After that visit, Kwame never went back to see Zainab again. But he did something unexpected. He arranged for her to have access to the best mental health treatment available in the prison system. He made sure she had the resources to help herself. Not because he owed her anything, but because he believed that everyone, no matter how broken they were, deserved a chance at redemption. Years passed. Kwame continued to build his business, but with a different philosophy. He used his wealth to help others. He created a foundation dedicated to helping victims of domestic abuse and attempted murder. He funded mental health programs in prisons. He worked to change the legal system so that other innocent people wouldn't suffer the same injustice that his mother had nearly suffered. Comfort lived to see her son become not just a successful businessman, but a man of profound wisdom and compassion. She lived to see him mentor young entrepreneurs, not just in business, but in how to be good human beings. She lived to see him become a voice for the voiceless, an advocate for the broken, a bridge between the wealthy and the poor. And in the end, the legacy that Kwame left behind wasn't measured in the number of businesses he owned or the amount of money he had accumulated. It was measured in the lives he had changed, the people he had helped, and the way he had chosen to respond to betrayal with compassion instead of vengeance. This is the true African folktale, passed down through generations, not because it is a story of villains and victims, but because it is a story about humanity. It is a story about how love can be both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. It is a story about how the choices we make in our darkest moments define who we truly are. And most importantly, it is a story about how forgiveness, not as a gift to the person who hurt us, but as a gift to ourselves, is the most powerful force in the world. If you have made it this far, thank you for being part of this journey. This story teaches us that life is never as simple as good versus evil. Every person is complex. Every person has a story. Every person has pain that drives their actions. And every person has the potential to change, to grow, to become better than they were before. Thank you for watching this entire story. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one. Share this video with everyone you know. Comment below and tell us what you think about Kwame's choice to forgive Zainab. Do you think he made the right decision? Tell us your thoughts. Your comments inspire us to keep creating these incredible stories that remind us what it means to be human.